why don't you bring the panel up here? Okay. And this panel is actually all about whether lawyers are going to be hiring coders or whether coders are going to be hiring lawyers in the future, and why, and how that relationship can and should work. So grab a seat. I'll get back off the stage. You guys can all sit. Don't worry about it. Patricia, why don't you begin introducing yourself?
My name is Patricia Casillo Flanagan. I'm an immigration and business attorney in South Florida. My passion is to help entrepreneurs from out of the United States bring their business and their talents to the United States, and also help American companies bring the talent that they need to make their business grow.
I'm Tom Flanagan. I'm the husband. Just tagging along. Just kidding. I'm also an attorney. We help people get their lives back on track after an accident, or if you listened to me earlier, after you get your crypto stolen. I grew up, born and raised down here, Floridian, and I've been in the crypto space for several years now. So we're thinking of ways to help small businesses advance their businesses with crypto, and or also if you were a victim of a crypto scam.
Hello, everyone. My name is MJ Granados-Godoy, and I'm a business and real estate transactional attorney here in Miami, Florida. My firm, Simply Legal, dedicates itself to helping business owners and investors here in the United States and abroad that are trying to invest in the United States in different arenas, digital, non-digital, real estate. And we are one of the firms that is really trying to incorporate all of this into the real world and making sure that we can support all of you with your business transactions. And happy to meet all the developers that would like to work with us and making sure that we can provide solid contracts and make businesses stronger.
And if you missed it yesterday, MJ did a really great presentation entitled, "What's it going to look like the first time a DAO tries to buy a commercial office building in downtown Miami?" And of course, it could be the first time a DAO tries to buy a commercial office building in any city. And of course, it could be the first time a DAO tries to buy any physical asset that's going to have to be managed in the real world by actual human beings. So that talk is applicable, and that talk will be on the DeFi Miami website. And if you put your phone on this QR code, so everyone take your phone out. Everyone take your phone out. If you haven't done it already, take your phone out. Put it on the QR code. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. You can put them on there. Or if you just go all the way to the bottom, introduce yourself, you'll get on the list and we'll share these videos with you, and a lot more resources that we're going to be developing based on the questions we're getting from people these last couple of days. Not just me, but for everyone.
Yeah.
So I'm Tom Petrelli. We own Petrelli Previtera. This is my business partner. And we take smart people and we take them from chaos to clarity through the divorce process. We are looking to take smart contracts and incorporate them into our family law business for post-nuptial agreements, prenuptial agreements, settlement contracts, you name it. We want to get everything and anything we can involved in a smart contract.
And I'm Mindy Previtera. Our company is also named Divorce Done Right because we believe in taking and empowering people from chaos to clarity, and we see a future where we're going to disrupt the legal landscape and use smart contracts to help actually make the legal world a better, more efficient place. If you were here yesterday, we described a scenario where if there's a breach of contract or a scenario where we try to go through the court, it can take, no joke, a year, especially if something like a global pandemic happens. The court moves at such a molasses slow pace. We think that this is such a huge opportunity for our clients in the future. Thank you.
So let me just talk about that conversation we had yesterday. Because for anyone who wasn't here, I think it's really a great foundation to understand the talk we're about to have. Typical scenario, let's not talk about pandemic land, right? Let's say we get past the pandemic, we're no longer gonna have a pandemic, things quote unquote go back to normal, right? And a typical scenario would be where a parent owes child support, and there's the parent who owes the child support, and there's the parent who's receiving the child support. Now, I'm going to operate on the assumption that everyone in this room is probably above average intelligence. And I'm going to operate on the assumption that you wouldn't be here if you weren't more creative than the average person walking around on this planet. So you're all smarter and more creative and obviously more curious than most people. And I mean that with a lot of respect, sincerely. Therefore, I'm going to ask you to use your intelligence and your creativity to apply this example to your own business and your own life. Don't just sit there and tune it out and check your email and think, well, this doesn't apply to me because I'm not involved in a child custody dispute, right? This is just a scenario that I think everyone can sort of imagine or relate to or understand. And here's how it plays out in reality. I'm going to play the attorney representing the mother. Mindy's going to play the attorney representing the father. And the mother owes child support to the father. Got it? The mother owes child support to the father. So, the mother didn't, so the father's attorney, Mindy, is going to call, the client is going to call Mindy, and the father's going to say to Mindy, hey, Mindy, my ex-wife was supposed to pay child support this month and didn't. What are you going to do about it? And Mindy's going to say,
So let me get on the phone with opposing counsel and see what's going on.
and then she calls opposing counsel, and the day she calls, I am out on my boat. Because it's a Wednesday, where else would I be? When I get back, I see my message, and I call Mindy on Thursday, except it's Thursday, and Mindy is in court. She's not avoiding me, she's not being uncooperative, she's just legitimately in court. When she gets done with court, she calls me on Friday and finally reaches me.
Ring, ring.
Hello?
Rjon, hi. I'm calling to talk about the clients that we have together in the case where there's not child support being paid. We have a problem.
What's the problem?
The problem is your client's late in the child support obligations.
Oh, well, let me look into that, and I'll get back to you and see if we can get this resolved right away, because you're right. She should be making her child support payments.
Okay, and I know we're both busy, and I know that we have that golf outing later, but can you just please do this quickly? My client's really hurting for the cash.
I'll do it as quickly as I can. I'll call her before the end of the week.
Okay, thank you so much. See you at golf.
This is now Friday. Ring, ring, I call the client, and the client isn't there because the client is busy at his second job. I'm sorry, the client isn't there because she's busy doing whatever she's doing, and so she can't exactly be responsive, and she says she'll call me back on Monday. So she calls me back on Monday, and I say, hey, listen, I got a call from opposing counsel, and she says you haven't paid your child support. Is that true? And my client says, that's not true. I did pay my child support. Okay, I'll see if I can get to the bottom of that. Click. Monday, I call Mindy, and Mindy is not available because Mindy is out with her kids because she runs an actual business that doesn't require her to be there all the livelong day. It keeps working and working and working and working for her even when she's not there. And so she's not there that day, and so she calls me back on Tuesday, and I say, hey, Mindy, my client says that they pay the child support. Are you all getting the idea this drags out fucking forever? right? This is the point. Because then it goes to her client and then my client, and back and forth we go. And then next thing you know, we file a motion, and then we get on the judge's calendar, and then the judge finally hears what we both have to say, and 3 months has gone by. And meanwhile, this hasn't been resolved, and this is the beauty of smart contracts, right?
Absolutely.
Because a smart contract can automatically debit the account and make sure that the payment gets made on time every month. And the smart contract knows if it didn't get paid, and if it didn't get paid, the smart contract can instantly trigger the consequence for the late payment or the non-payment. Are you starting to see the beauty of smart contracts? Yeah? In child support, in anything, right? So now the question is, are the lawyers going to be hiring the coders to automate and systematize and make these transactional relationships so much more efficient and objective and fair and reasonable? Or are the coders going to say, you know, the client has come to me to write them a smart contract. I didn't go to law school. I need to get someone to actually draft the contract, which I can then code and automate. That's the question that we are really kind of exploring and examining here. So, since you got the microphone, Mindy, what are your thoughts?
Well, I want to even take that a step further because I want to even open it up to when would the courts or the government actually employ these coders? Because right now, using that same example, right now the way that it works with a child support case is a payment goes to a third party which holds the money. Then they disperse the money to the other person. So it's not a direct transaction, there's a middleman. And therefore, in that example, when you say, oh, I paid it, it's sitting in the middleman, it just hasn't been dispersed, it's not my problem, you have to do an audit. And then that audit can take months. This is the government. So I want to take that even a step further and say, how can we as lawyers convince the courts how important these smart contracts and the programmers for this could be to even the courts to make them more efficient?
And let's just change the subject and say it's no longer a divorce, it's no longer child custody, it's now a real estate closing.
Yeah, and real estate closings are going to take a while, but I think that we even start first with making sure that everybody here understands the importance of having a lawyer involved in any type of contract. Because I've been reading a lot, and it seems that the smart contract has just become part of the defined terms in the space, and people are failing to see the second word, and it's a contract. It still requires some other things that are not being contemplated right now. And it starts with the users of smart contracts asking their coders to involve an attorney. So I think it's extremely important that everybody here understands that this is a need.
So when we were earlier down at the Maddie booth downstairs, and I was talking with an attorney, and he said that they were dealing with hundreds of thousands of dollars of crypto going back and forth, and no lawyer, they were creating the smart contracts, but no lawyer was reviewing them. And that there was today this trust in the community of this money being just wired back and forth with no lawyers reviewing them. And he who wore his lawyer hat said, I think that we still need lawyers to review these contracts. So we don't look at smart contracts as a way to cut the lawyers out. We think that lawyers need to exist in this arena because there are still laws that apply to make it valid.
Right, and I think that it's so important because a smart contract is kind of like a LegalZoom contract. And if you've heard of LegalZoom, it's like a template. It's been created and people plug it in and it's accessible because it's fast. You just go in there, pay, and you download it and you input your information. That's not legal advice. So people are thinking, oh, I don't need legal advice to put together these smart contracts. And it's not about having attorneys review every process and delaying the transaction, 'cause that defeats the entire purpose. We are aware of our reputation of slowing things down. That's not what we're saying here. So I think that what I'm trying to get out there and making sure that you're thinking about is that smart contracts, before they're launched, they should be reviewed by an attorney to make sure that all the terms and the codes reflect what the intent of the parties are.
I think you can take that a step further. I think that there are solutions out there, from talking to a couple of people yesterday, where things are no code or low code, where attorneys can be involved in the process with the programmers to insert for cookie cutter contracts, and we have a lot of those, believe it or not, where we can put standard language and we can choose from a menu of the different standard clauses that we would suggest and have the appropriate language for each circumstance in there. And if we did that ahead of time, I think that would take a lot of the headaches or the possible headaches down the road to kind of lawyer-proof it down the road.
Something else I want to add is that the whole purpose of a smart contract is to make the process easier, faster, more effective. But what people don't realize is that if we don't make sure that we have taken precautions in our contract to prevent problems from happening, or by incorporating the possible solutions for problems that could happen, if there is a problem and no lawyer was involved or no provisions were created to prevent to prevent problems or to discuss how problems will be solved, then the smart contract probably will end up in litigation anyways. Mm-hmm. And the litigation will last years, it will be complicated, and it will totally defeat the purpose of you having a smart contract in the first place.
Well, and then it begs the question of how does that even get into litigation, right?
Exactly.
Because once the code is executed, it's irreversible. Mm-hmm. So what are we litigating? And how are we litigating?
Yeah, and just finding that out, like who has jurisdiction, where we can sue, who can sue who's liable. Only that part could probably take years because the courts haven't really dealt with this. So the whole point of having an attorney involved is to prevent that from happening, to have all those provisions already determined before the smart contract is signed.
I think yesterday the word I heard for the first time was oracle. I'm sure a lot of you know that word, but it was the first time I heard of it. And essentially what they were describing is it's a arbitrator or mediator, and you can use this person if there's a disagreement to, maybe we can even write that in there, to be the middleman or help decide if there is. I think you were describing that yesterday.
Well, that makes the contract not smart. If there's any third party in there that needs to execute anything, it's not a smart contract. It's just a normal contract that we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Right, and yesterday we were speaking about discretionary terms that are so important in certain transactions. So right now they're being used for some short contracts that are easy. If this happened, then that happens. But as we continue to use smart contracts, you're going to use them for larger transactions that have perhaps discretionary terms. So that means I want this to be, I was giving an example of a tenant returning a space. It has to be in broom clean condition. Who determines that that actually got met? Or it has to be paid a certain way, and it couldn't be through the wallet, because that's easy to prove. But what if the proof was that you have to pay a third person and it wasn't on the blockchain, it was out in the real world? How do you determine that that proof is sufficient? So when there are these gray areas, it's that needs to be incorporated. So it's really important that we start working with programmers to make sure that this becomes the norm. And for you guys out there that are using smart contracts in your transactions, to start thinking about how you can incorporate that legal piece. So I think it's really interesting, and there's definitely lawyers out there that are not thinking like in the box. So we exist.
One thing I heard that was pretty cool listening on my way here actually yesterday on YouTube, which, I mean, you can learn a ton about crypto on YouTube. That's where I learned a lot back in the day, is with smart contracts now. Like you can get insurance on things that you couldn't even get before. Like they use this example of this wheat farmer, and he's able to get insurance on the failure of his crop. And what they use is, and thanks for bringing up the term oracle, because that's how I remembered this. You can go out and buy insurance on your crop, and I guess the smart contract was programmed, well, if you have so many days, like 3 days where the temperature is above 95 degrees, the smart contract will automatically execute and give the farmer a payout. Now, why 95 degrees? I have no idea. I'm not a wheat farmer. I guess that sets up the measure of success of his crop. But to do that, it would go look off the blockchain to an oracle, because they're like, well, how does the blockchain know what temperature it is? So it would look to a trusted third party like an oracle, wherever that would be, I guess some kind of national temperature database. But then, I guess both sides of that party need to agree on, well, who's the oracle going to be? What if there's some kind of failure in that data? Because now you're looking off the blockchain. But I thought the cool part about it is that would really speed up your insurance claim. I mean, if you've ever dealt with an insurance claim before, I mean, they're supposed to only take 30 days in Florida to give you a response, but I mean, good luck with that if you can even get the adjuster on the phone. So I thought that was cool how smart contracts can even speed things up to where you won't, maybe in the future, you don't even need like an insurance adjuster, or you don't have to go spend your hard-earned money to go hire a lawyer like me just because the adjuster isn't answering the phone. So that's why we're all thinking about this now, because there's going to be different implications for everybody's job in the future. I mean, look at the SunPass tolls. I mean, when was the last time you stopped to actually put a quarter in the toll on the turnpike or wherever you may live? No, it's all cameras now. And pretty soon they were also saying that your car isn't even going to, you won't even need, with blockchain technology, you won't even need like a credit card for the SunPass to link to. It'll just know your car will go by, it'll charge you the toll automatically to like your wallet. Then you'll go up to the gas station, you don't have to pull out a credit card there, you just pull up your car and it just identifies your car by some kind of Bluetooth or other technology. You just start pumping your gas or your electric if you have an electric mobile. So, I mean, like, there's things that are happening that I don't even think, like, I mean, even I or a lot of other people today are thinking that could be possible maybe even in the next 10 years. So, I won't even need an office maybe.
No, going back to what you were saying, for your client not to have to go through the adjuster and have to hire somebody after they need you from the beginning. So you draft for them a smart contract where you can bypass the whole part about the adjuster.
Right. Actually, yes, I meant to add, it's actually more cost efficient to get that sorted out ahead of time than litigating over it later, because when you litigate it over later and go to an attorney and say, all right, I got to go sue, XYZ corporation because they didn't pay me my money. And you're like, how much is that going to cost me? Like, well, I don't know. It's $500 an hour. I mean, it could be 50 hours. It could be 100 hours. I don't know if they're going to hire an attorney and they're going to contest it. But when you work these things out ahead of time, say you only have to pay an attorney, I don't know, an hour or two to negotiate what's exactly going to be in the code of that smart contract, and have it solidified, like who's this trusted oracle going to be, for example, to know the temperature on that day. That solves a lot of headaches down the line, because most of what I've had to do in litigation is tear up contracts later on where two people disagree on what the terms mean, and that's a lot of hours of wasted time that you could be putting back into your business or your family. So,
Hey, I just have a quick question. How many, just show of hands, how many of you have either an already existing business that you're making your living from, or an idea or plans to start a blockchain business that you hope will give you a better future? Most of you. All right, put your hands back up, please. And keep your hands up if you think that at some point, realistically, you're going to want or need to raise some venture capital. Okay, because one of the things that we do, if you go to the QR code, is we will invest in businesses that we believe in. Like, we'll put up money, we'll put up resources, we'll do all kinds of great stuff. And one of the questions that we're going to ask, and one of the questions I think you should expect any serious investor to ask, is about the strength of your intellectual property, about the strength of your contracts, about your regulatory compliance. I mean, these are just some basic, boring business stuff that I think you should anticipate any reasonably sophisticated, serious investor who's going to be putting up any kind of serious money is going to want to have real answers to. I'm not saying that there aren't a bunch of yahoos running around out there just with, I guess, more money than they know what to do with and just throwing it at anyone who will take it, because we know that's true also. But I think that when you get into the world of serious investors who are bringing more than just money, but they're bringing value add to the investment, these are the kinds of things you got to be taking seriously and expect to be asked about.
I think just to expand on that too, Rjon, for those who raised their hand, if you have partners, business operating agreements is such a paramount tool that all of you need that a lot of people I've been talking to, they don't have. They don't have a partnership agreement or even an operating agreement if the parties decide not to partner anymore, or one partner wants to get bought out, or they just see the vision of the company going in a different direction. This is a very trusting community, which I think is wonderful and magical and beautiful. But as lawyers, the 4 of us or 5 of us up here are like, you need an operating agreement. This is something that will protect you. And we are all about, we've seen, in law school, they teach you everything that's gone wrong on the most basic level. They show you crazy examples of everything that's gone wrong, which is why we always want to protect people who come to us with problems like this and help you get ahead of it.
How many of you have partners? Raise your hand if you got partners. Okay. One of the things that a good operating agreement will do is it will actually prevent a lot of escalation of problems. Not just because of the agreement, but Mindy, one of Mindy's specialties is prenuptial agreements.
Yes.
And she'll tell you that, I think statistically speaking, couples that have a prenuptial agreement get divorced less than couples that don't have a prenuptial agreement.
100%.
You know why that is? It's because they have less to fight about. There's less stress, there's less anxiety, there's less confusion, there's less mystery. They just like, okay, we don't have to worry about all of this other stuff because it's been resolved ahead of time in a prenuptial agreement, and now we can focus on the really important things in the relationship. Whereas the couples that don't have it all figured out ahead of time, they end up fighting over things because the not insecurity. What's the word I'm looking for? The
Uncertainty.
The uncertainty adds fuel to the fire. Can you all understand and appreciate how that works in a marriage? Yeah? Okay, well, it works the same way in a business relationship. When you and your partner don't have a clear operating agreement for who's responsible for what, what's going to happen if we want to wind this thing down, who's going to be able to buy out who and under what terms.
Oh,
Let's
but he's my
agree to
best
all this stuff.
friend.
Sorry?
But he's my best friend.
Yeah, exactly.
And honestly, I can talk from experience of not having an operating agreement and having a partner and going through the pain and the litigation and all the bullshit that went with that cost me years of my life, versus we had a partner that we asked to leave, and we had an operating agreement, and it was much smoother. We still had litigation, of course, but it was a lot less to fight about, and it was very certain what was going to happen.
So remember I was talking earlier how I've been going around the booths talking to people, and like you can spot the people who have a real business and you can spot the people who just scraped up some money to buy a booth, but they're really just posing. One of the questions you can ask is, how many partners are there in this business? How many shareholders are there in the business? How many founders are there in this business? And if they say, oh yeah, I've got 3 co-founders, you say, oh, do you have a written operating agreement? And they look at you strange, and now you know they don't, which means you know that they don't, which means that if they don't have a written operating agreement, and you know that means they didn't go to a lawyer to help them put their business together, which if they didn't go to a lawyer to help them put their business together, you know that means they probably also didn't go to an accountant. And if they didn't go to a lawyer and they didn't go to an accountant, you know that means they probably have shit for books and financial controls. And if they don't have a good accountant, they don't have a good bookkeeper because they didn't have the sophistication or the foresight to go to a lawyer, you know that means they probably are playing it maybe a little fast and loose with the regulatory compliance issues, right? I mean, that one question, like, is how you pull this, you pull that little string in the sweater and the whole thing starts to unravel. There's 100 questions like that you can ask to figure out what's really going on in someone's business. And there are a lot of people who have made a lot of money really fast with crypto trading and things like that, and they didn't do it through building businesses, and they got more money than sophistication, and they will probably give you money for your plan without asking you smart questions. But that's now also the person who has a majority stake or a big say in your venture. Is that really the person you want to be in business with? As compared to the person who actually built their business and generated their wealth by making smart business decisions and probably a lot of mistakes along the way, you got to expect they're going to ask you these questions. I have abruptly excused myself from more conversations in the last 2 days from people who were perfectly nice, and they were talking about something that sounded like a really cool idea, but like in 2 minutes I figured out that it's nothing more than an idea, and I don't want to waste my time. Anyway,
Right.
back to operating agreements. Sorry.
And there's a difference between people who run their business as a hobby versus people who run their business because it's a business. You can tell it right from the start when you have a conversation with the people. So.
This is probably a good time for me to just interject this. John, our stage manager, we've rearranged the schedule because obviously we've gone off schedule. So the next panel is who's going to be suing who in the metaverse and for what. So we're just going to roll this panel into that one because we're kind of talking about that same stuff anyway. So as soon as you can, as soon as you see the moment, everyone just start talking and someone just say, our next topic will be who's going to be suing who in the metaverse.
Well, real
Look at
quick,
the
I
camera
want to
and
add
say
one
it.
last thing about smart contracts.
All right, and then
Okay. Go ahead.
I found it amazing. We were speaking with a vendor downstairs, and he was an attorney, and he was telling a story about how a large contract came in. This person wired $300,000 of money in for certain merchandise, and they have no idea if the person's 15 years old, 10 years old, 25 years old, male, female. They got in this whole conversation about
convicted felon.
right, and when you have a smart contract, you can't be doing business with people who are minors. So your smart contracts don't even have a way to screen that out. So that seems to be a crazy phenomenon to me that people are doing business just on the web based upon fake names, screen names, whatever happens to be.
And they could be on the OFAC list. So you could be helping money laundering or funding terrorism. So it's you have to be very, very careful.
Right, and it's just a wild, wild west, and you really need to kind of think about that and protect yourselves.
So we're now going to switch topics to who's going to sue who first in the metaverse. And I think that my personal opinion, the first lawsuit we're going to see is going to be in Decentraland, and it's going to be over digital real estate. And I'm very curious how the lawyers, I'll talk to the real estate attorney on how you're going to handle that lawsuit in the metaverse.
Real estate in the metaverse. Oh, wow. First, we would have to look at the blockchain to make sure that we see the records. Is it a dispute over who owns who? What kind of land, and when did this purchase happen, and whether enough money was paid for it? Was it a scam? My question is, even if we determine what the issue would be, who is going to hear this in the metaverse? Or will you take it out of the metaverse into the real life and take it to court?
Well, there is no metaverse court.
Right. So would we go to some, I don't know. Because he said who's going to sue who in the metaverse. We can't yet.
Right. So my understanding is once the transaction's done, it's done. It doesn't matter whether it's good or bad.
It's irrevocable, right?
It's irrevocable. So
So what's the dispute?
I would think it has to be outside the metaverse, would be my point.
Well, we were even talking about this earlier when we were comparing it to what happens if, code is law. That's a lot of what I've heard. Code is law, code is law, code is law.
Code is not law.
I understand. but
Law is law.
That's what I'm
Tell the
hearing.
sheriff carrying the gun and
That's what I'm hearing.
taking you away in handcuffs that code is law. He
We
will
s-
laugh in your face.
We spent 3 hours discussing this last night with someone who was a lawyer, and his viewpoint was code is lawless.
Code is lawless because people think code is law. I think the point that Tom is getting at is a lot of these disputes in the metaverse are going to get resolved in two ways, probably in parallel. One is there will be the court of public opinion in the metaverse, which isn't really going to count for much in the real world. And then there's going to be the people who sue each other for fraud that takes place in the metaverse, but those suits for fraud are going to take place in the real world.
Right. It's good. Right.
Like, you scammed me out of some virtual real estate, or you devalued my virtual real estate by building a sewage treatment plant next door to it, and now no one wants to stay at my virtual resort.
So I'm just picturing, so you guys all have to use your imagination and picture a courtroom. I'm picturing, so how we present evidence in court. Right now, you're physically in court, you're handing physical documents to the judge, they're entering those physical documents into the record. Can you imagine where you're going into a courtroom and you're putting a, what do they call those? A VR? A VR goggle on a judge.
Who's 80 years old.
And you're saying, you, judge, who's 80 years old, you have to come into my metaverse to see the example of how I was wronged in the metaverse. So everybody's sitting in court.
He's going to say, counselors in my chambers now.
He's going to say, I have no idea what you're talking about. You're making me look like an idiot. Get out of my courtroom and settle this outside of the courtroom. Yeah. But I'm just picturing I'm picturing the plaintiff's attorney, the defendant's attorney, everybody's wearing their goggles and walking through the metaverse, and the judge in the metaverse has a robe on, and he's sitting there trying to navigate the real universe in the metaverse. Can you imagine?
That's good imagination.
And this judge doesn't even use email.
Right. They don't
And that's
use
where
email.
the law is going to be so far behind. I think as lawyers, as we're struggling between what we're seeing and how far behind the law is already, and it's true, like, it was less than 10 years, 5 years, where they're like, we don't know if electronic communication is an ethical way to communicate in the legal world. Like, this is how far behind the law is.
That was in 2001. That's not that long ago.
Right. I can't imagine you go in front of a court and you start saying the word metaverse or blockchain. They're going to be like, blockchain?
I think in 2013 or 14, I think the courts in all different states and bar associations finally said, you know what, we'll allow you guys to keep your data in the cloud. And I was like, I've been keeping my stuff in the cloud for years. I guess I was breaking the rules, sorry. But no joking aside, I think that what's going to happen in the metaverse there's going to be some type of dispute resolution system that needs to be created where people can go when there is a dispute on this. That's going to kind of just be some type of algorithm that's going to take these things into consideration and process it. And that will be its own smart contract in itself.
Right, that would be an arbitration clause in your smart contract.
Correct.
I had a conversation last night where a gentleman described to me how his 12-year-old was playing Roblox, is it called?
Yes.
And he was scammed, where I don't understand it, but somebody gave him a token or promised him something and didn't deliver on that promise, and his 12-year-old now is so disgruntled with the world. It was his first lesson of mistrust, and his 12-year-old was like, "What can we do, Dad? Who can we sue?" And I'm like, great, I love this. Who can we sue? This is wonderful. But who? And so I said, is there something within Roblox? Like, do they have their own sort of ethical system where they actually sheriff this or sort of police this in any way? Do these programs have any sort of, right? Like these programs, they want to keep it ethical. You don't want people coming in and scamming, or is that acceptable in this world?
There was a speaker yesterday that was talking about how most of these websites don't even have terms and conditions or privacy policies on their websites. And if you know anything about building websites and a little bit of common sense, that's your rules, that's your contract with your users. So if you don't have any of that, and that's apparently very common as to what the speaker was saying, then what do you do?
Have you ever read those things?
Yes, I
Okay.
write them.
Oh, okay.
And a little thing now where you go to every website and ask you about your cookies.
Yes.
That's required too. Especially if you're in the EU. I don't know if anyone hears if your website's in the EU, but that's a big thing.
Well, and for any content creators out there, I think this would be a great opportunity to start a trend or start making this the standard where you can say that we have our own policing of keeping this ethical, keeping this authentic, and that's part of what you're selling to people, where if something goes wrong, if somebody steals a token and it's, not part of the rules, there's rules and regulations, and we have our own oracle, arbitrator, sort of judge and jury all locked into one, and we make sure that we keep this game true.
Right, and I brought this up yesterday in one of our panels. There's a company, I couldn't remember what the company was called yesterday, but a company called Precedent, who is out there, and they're actually combing the databases for certain types of law to come up with what was precedent in certain types of situations for breach of contract, for different types of things where it could easily be done by an algorithm, and the dispute would be done based upon the facts that are alleged in the case between the parties, and there's no judge. The judge becomes the contract, or I guess in this case, an oracle. But there needs to be some type of development in this field for these problems that are going to arise down the road, because I think there is so much trust in the community, which is not a bad thing, but whenever there's trust, there's also people who are doing nefarious things.
We take advantage of that trust.
And something we cannot forget is that the metaverse is borderless. It's not really controlled by any jurisdiction, and you cannot just pretend or assume that because you bought this piece of real estate in the metaverse while you were sitting in your house in Miami, Florida, the laws of Florida will apply, or the laws of the United States for that matter. So that's why you need to prepare your smart contract before you buy the real estate in the metaverse, to make sure you have a clause there that says, okay, we're gonna go arbitrate in this place, or we're gonna go to these, with these people to mediate. But all that has to be there. There has to be a venue and an arbitrator in your smart contract.
Well, it's almost like the District of Columbia. It could be its own entity.
Let's open it for questions.
Oh, should we give her a mic?
If we're buying land,
John.
how the smart contract will apply? Because how we can get in contact with the website or the metaverse that is selling the land?
She said if you're buying land, how would the smart contract apply?
Exactly. How can we get in touch or her if I hire?
And if you've got the microphone in the audience, Who's got the microphone?
For
Yeah, use the
example, if I
microphone.
hire Patricia,
Yes.
how can she help me to write the smart contract, and how she will get in touch with the metaverse?
Because, but you will have to negotiate. And you said, this is the contract that I'm sending to you, and we will work with our programmer to send your counter offer to them. You know, we might not necessarily be able to enter to the contract that I initially sent to you, but we can definitely send a counter offer.
Besides her to tap her after that.
But this is also, I just want to add to that. We think that there's going to be two parallel worlds going on. There's going to be the world of the metaverse and sort of a lawless world where legal issues will arise and people in this lawless world will want legal remedy, which will have to take place in the law world. And so that's where we'll have to sort of try to bridge these two parallel worlds.
Right.
Hey,
and-
Mindy?
Yes.
This young lady over here has a question that is directly on point. We just hand the microphone over to her, and she'll give it back to you.
My question is pretty much like what you were saying, and the differences, or maybe just looking at the comparison of how things will be argued in court over things that happen in the metaverse. And my idea or my question is, why wouldn't we maybe create a different police, like a system of police in the metaverse, attorneys in the metaverse, a court system in the metaverse? Like, so it's not, I mean, like you said, it's parallel, but maybe it could benefit from having a separate
I am
legal
happy to be the
system.
first attorney in the metaverse. I will
Seriously?
open my metaverse law firm.
We already have land. We're going to
We
do that.
have land in Decentraland where we can put our law firm.
I think that would be really cool. I'm a
Do it.
PhD student, and my dissertation is pretty much looking at like how crypto and the metaverse is going to be regulated or utilized by the government. So like, I feel like because it's such that big gap as far as understanding and things like that, it may just be more beneficial to have a separate legal system altogether for the metaverse instead of trying to make people that are not, they don't have the capacity, and I'm not going to say they don't have the capacity to understand. It's just so much that goes into it that it'll be really difficult to manage or, you know, whatever.
Right, and I think this has to do with jurisdiction, which means that the government in the real world would have to give up some of its jurisdiction to the metaverse jurisdiction. So that is where the problem exists.
I mean,
So-
but they wouldn't even admit that it
Can
was
you
real.
imagine?
How are you
doesn't. I
giving
mean, that's how different-
Exactly. So in order for us
territories
to
work.
right, so in order for even police to have any type of authority would mean that the police here would give up the authority.
They'll just assume that authority.
Exactly, and they really don't have a real.
Microphone.
I need a microphone. Okay, why do we want that? Like, I think the whole point that we are here, that we are buying Bitcoin, is because we don't want to buy money that has to follow regulation through the international organizations. We don't want the government involved in the way our money grows. We don't want, we're doing smart contracts because we don't want many intermediaries in between one another. So why? I don't think how the world or the metaverse will be different if we have institutions that mimic the world outside of it. I think, like in my ideal world, we could choose whoever we want to arbitrate or mediate the problems that we might have in the metaverse without having to subject ourselves to the moment we were an hour ago when Rjon was calling Mindy to call the judge, and a year will pass by and nothing will be solved. And I think we want more efficient and less intermediaries in this new world where we can do business and grow our talents and grow our businesses.
Can I
and grow our
jump in
money.
after you're done?
Yes.
Just before the next. This goes back to what I was talking about earlier, right? I don't believe that what you're describing is essentially a parallel reality, right? And the question that you're basically saying is, why can't we have a full court system complete with judges, sheriffs, whose duty is to levy property? So in the real world, if you sue me and you get a judgment against me, and I say, hey, you know, good luck collecting it. Your attorney will hire investigators, and Tom's whole presentation was all about how to track down the assets. And once the assets are identified, then the attorney, your attorney, would go to the judge and say, we found Rjon's assets. He's got this boat. He's got this car. He's got this jewelry in a safe deposit box. He's got this jewelry he's wearing around his neck. He's got this money in a bank account. He's got these stocks. He's got these bonds. He's got these whatever. He's got these assets. And the judge orders the sheriff to go and seize the assets. And this is what sheriffs do. They go to banks and they seize bank accounts. They go to marinas and they seize boats. They go to parking lots and they seize cars. They go to houses and they seize art collections. They will take possession of your person and they will remove the jewelry from your neck and seize that. This is what sheriffs do in the real world when they're ordered to do so by a judge, right? And so the issue is, why not have a system of enforcement in the metaverse? Yes? And my point is, I don't think that's going to happen. My opinion, having studied this for not that long, but what? Like someone's been studying it for more than a long time? This is all brand new. No one knows anything. Yeah, it's true, right? Like you can always tell someone who really doesn't know what they're talking about because they pretend like they know everything. We're all got like little pieces of Swiss cheese where we know a lot about something and then you take one step over and you know nothing, you fall in a hole. But I've been studying money for a long time. And I don't think that the metaverse is really going to go to Web 4.0 until we stop talking about cryptocurrency in relationship to fiat currency. When you say, I'm going to buy dinner for X Satoshis, or I'm going to buy my car for X Ethereum, and you're evaluating the value of the car, the value of the house, the value of the professional services, the value of taking the vacation, the value of the food at the restaurant or whatever, in proportion to Ethereum for Ethereum for Ethereum for Ethereum, or Bitcoin for Bitcoin for Bitcoin for Bitcoin, and you're not pathologically relating it back to the US dollar, right? Because as long as you're relating the value of your cryptocurrency to the US dollar, you are a speculator. You're not living in the metaverse, you're just speculating. You're just speculating on a commodity, hoping it's gonna go up in value in relation to the US dollar. And whether you thought it all the way through, whether you've gamed it all the way out, whether you're conscious about it, whether you're honest with yourself when you look in the mirror, you are definitely thinking at some point, I'm gonna convert this back to US dollars and live happily ever after. When we stop thinking that way, when we're thinking about cryptocurrency for cryptocurrency for cryptocurrency, that's when we can start to have serious conversations about an alternate court system in the metaverse, right? Microphone.
I definitely understand what you said. That makes a lot of sense. My fear, and I guess maybe the reason why I'm looking into this, is that I feel like before it gets there, the government is still going to want to regulate. They're still going to want to like have a say-so on how things are going. So even though we're not there to where we are, like it's really its own separate entity, there is going to be some kind of cross space. And I feel like if people don't do something like, I mean, I'm not going to say people, but if there's not some type of coordinating council to where you have people.
Made up of people.
Yeah, a meetup of people.
So it's people.
Yes, politicians and
People.
that, here.
People use all these acronyms. For people. There's people trying to figure this shit out.
Yeah. So, I mean, until we get there, I just feel like if the people in this community do not come up with some type of system, legal system to how to police it, because even though the freedom of decentralization is cool, it is certain things that you still don't want to go on. You don't want it to be a lawless environment. You don't want people to be able to steal. You don't want people to be able to scam. And so, like, if it's not done within this metaverse, then the government outside, the real one, is going to try to come in and make decisions on and not understand it.
So I agree with what Rjon said. I think that it needs to stay decentralized, and I think there's ways to do that, and I'll give an example. So if you were to have a smart contract for a marriage contract, that smart contract, and if one of the terms in there was, did John cheat on Jane, right? And there's evidence that's submitted through whatever that process is going to be, and it's decentralized, and maybe there's committees, okay, that do this. Like there's a DAO, and the DAO has 30 different members of whatever it is that all get to vote on it. That's a better system than having a centralized version where there's a judge who doesn't really give a shit about the case and just wants to process it because that's how the system works in the real world, right? So I think there's ways that certain types of issues could be, put to the test to see if they can be decentralized. And I think that's the perfect testing platform for it, is Decentraland or any of these places that we could use in the metaverse. And I think that's the system that I would like to see in the metaverse versus having the metaverse's issues come out of the metaverse and go into the real world, because in the real world, it'll just get fucked up.
I think that's a fascinating example that you just gave there. And it triggers something in my head that you can put whatever you want in a contract as long as it's not illegal. But you can say, okay, in the contract, you must wear red tomorrow. And every Wednesday, you have to wear red. It's a ridiculous term on a contract, but you can put it because it's your contract. As long as it's not illegal, you can put it. So putting something like an arbitration by a DAO in the metaverse is something that's not illegal. So you can definitely do something like that. So I think it's fascinating.
As long as it's left to the peers in the metaverse and not to a central organization.
That would be awesome.
Do you have a question?
Yeah. So, microphone. And we gotta wrap up.
To get this thing even remotely to stay on time, we gotta make this probably the last question. We're gonna take a quick break, and then we're going to, the next topic is going to be. The next topic is going to be.
I think it's my panel.
A bunch of boring business stuff you probably want to be thinking about if you want to take your blockchain business seriously. It's basically going to be a lot of Q&A. So if you've got questions about how to really run a legit business on the blockchain, we're not talking tech, we're talking just basic business fundamentals. And then we're going to be talking about, try not to fall asleep when I tell you this. This is the only thing that's sexy about this next topic is all the profits you make. And the only thing, it's bookkeeping. I'm sorry, there's no sexy way to say it. It's just bookkeeping. Raise your
Money
hand
is
if you're
sexy.
really on top of your bookkeeping. Raise your hand if you know bookkeeping. All right, well, then you'll really appreciate what I'm going to teach you about bookkeeping. And everyone else, pay attention, because you'll learn how to make a lot more money from your business when I teach you some basic bookkeeping stuff.
So Rjon, and also we wanted to discuss a little bit how DeFi could make the world a safer place.
And we're going to talk about how DeFi can make making the world a safer place. We are definitely talking about that.
Okay.
All right, so last question.
So listening to all of this, I think it's a great conversation, and maybe you guys can help me better understand this, but as I see it, all of this and everything that we've talked about for the past half an hour is predicated on the fact that identity is a public thing. that you have the ability to publicly identify a human being, right? I think that one of the things that, like, as an enthusiast, as somebody that, like, has been deeply involved in these networks for a very long time, is that right now regulation with KYC is the only method that we can attempt to draw the metaverse to an actual human being. But if we go to what Rjon was saying, to the point that it is crypto to crypto to crypto, I can spin up a new identity with every wallet. I can spin up an identity every 5 seconds if I want to, and realistically, you'll never be able to litigate against me because you don't know who I am. When we interact in the metaverse, you will never know who I am. Right now we're trying to keep it, but at some point it either is going to all fail or it's going to break down to the point that we don't have identities that we have to share with one another to interact through contracts. I can interact with you completely anonymously, indefinitely, as soon as we get to that point where I'm never selling my crypto for US dollars. I'm never trading it for anything other than a digital or physical service. And right now, it's a long way out. It's very much a long way out.
So let me address that. So I think at some point, there will have to be a system that's going to give you some type of social score. So the more business you do in the metaverse, the higher your score goes. And it's going to be based upon your experience on the blockchain. And the blockchain, there'll be some type of way to rate that. So every time you spin up a new identity, you're going to start at the bottom. Is the way I see it.
Yeah, and I mean that could definitely be something.
Like,
but I think you're right. I think
a social
that
score.
Right.
It's almost going to have to be like you have to have one high enough to participate in certain things. That way you can stay anonymous if you want to, but if you'd like to, it's a carrot and a stick.
Right, it's like being on the grid or off the grid to whatever degree you want. You know, you want to keep your low score and be kind of lawless, fine, but then you're not going to be able to participate in other things or other benefits for people that have higher scores.
Which creates trust, right? So if you
creates
want to
trust.
do a transaction, maybe you want to, in that scenario, you would want to do it with someone with a higher score and not a brand new ID.
I think the one, and I'll stop talking. This is just a conversation at this point. But I think the one downside to that is that as soon as somebody, let's say that we only provide medical services in the real world to people that have this score of X, Y, or Z. Well, all it takes is one doctor to come along and go, I'll provide it. I don't need your score. We'll just transact. Like it's really easy to break that down, right?
At his own risk or her own risk.
Right. But then it's like 1, 2, 3, and all of a sudden the whole thing is no longer. So I think it's an interesting conversation, and I think everyone should continue to think about it because we are trying to apply. A lot of these questions are, well, how do we apply what I'm comfortable and familiar with into this next phase of what it means to have an identity?
Absolutely.
Right. Like I was saying to someone last night, like I was at the party you guys threw.
Great party.
It was a good party. But I walked in there and I'm new to this whole world, so I don't know anybody. And I was saying that'd be great if, like, based on the blockchain, we could create some type of social score so I can look in the room. And it's not identifying who you are, okay, but I could say this person has a net worth of this person is that. This person, if I were single, this person would, has a higher compatibility with me. And you walk into, I think the blockchain is a perfect place for something like that to happen.
What, you're seeing like scores above people's heads?
Right, maybe I'm putting on my
pretty sure
virtual
that's a Black
glasses.
Mirror
Right,
episode.
I'm
Yeah,
opening my goggles and I'm like, okay.
You change your goggles from like your dating goggles and you see people's little things above their head or, their business goggles.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll end on that.
All right, so
Well,
we got to go to break. Otherwise, everyone's going to pee in their pants.
all right.
So listen, before we get going, I just want to say this about this. I appreciate that there's some frustration with panels like this because some people just want to be spoon-fed answers. How do we do this? What's the answer to that? How should it be, right? And that's really not what this panel is designed to do. This panel is designed to provoke thoughts, to get some discussion going, because we believe that the people who are going to be the most influential in this community, the people who are going to be the most successful in this industry, and it is an industry, are the people who are thinking about this stuff, because no one has the answers to any of it. Everyone's figuring it out, and the hours that you're investing here at this DeFi conference, these 2 days, are going to give you a huge competitive advantage over everyone else who didn't spend the last 48 hours thinking about this stuff. You have an intellectual head start, and that's going to give you a big advantage. And that's really what panels like this, not just this one, but in the other rooms as well, that's what they're really designed to do. So thank you, everyone, for your cooperation. We're going to take just a quick break. You don't even have to leave your stuff. I mean, you can leave your stuff and come right back to your seat. I just see people squirming in their seats. I know you got to pee. When we come back, we're going to talk about some boring business stuff that will help you make more money in your blockchain business. All right? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.